The real reason alchemy is ridiculed by modern science isn't because it's false, it's because it reveals truths far too dangerous to be freely shared. Since Julius Caesar's siege of Alexandria in 48 BC, priceless Egyptian writings on transmutation have vanished from public sight. In 1317, Pope John XXII issued the decretal Spondent Quas non-exhibent, outlawing alchemists who claimed to make gold and driving many texts into guarded ecclesiastical archives. Centuries later, Paracelsus, hounded for treating patients with chemical remedies, fled Basel amid mounting hostility, and much of his work was scattered or lost. The pattern is clear. Whenever a manuscript describes the mutual transformation of matter and practitioner, the authority of empires and churches trembles. Even Isaac Newton hid more than 1 million words on alchemy among his private papers. The scale of his secret research came to light only at a Sotheby's auction in 1936. These documented episodes, lost scrolls, papal decrees, and academic ridicule show that suppression, not mere legend, shaped our view of alchemy. To step beyond that filter is to approach knowledge that bypasses intermediaries and unsettles entrenched hierarchies. If you still dismiss alchemy as medieval folklore, look closely at those who, across history, paid to keep you thinking exactly that.
In the shadows of official scientific history, a disturbing truth remains deliberately hidden. There exists an ancestral knowledge of such power that its mass dissemination would threaten the very foundations of power structures. Absent from prestigious university catalogues and ignored by conventional academic annals, this knowledge represents an occult science that transcends simple material manipulation, capable of activating latent capacities in human beings, capabilities that global elites fear you might discover. Beyond modern chemistry, with its predictable periodic tables and catalogued reactions, stretches an enigmatic territory where matter and spirit intertwine inseparably. This domain, known as alchemy, is not limited to transforming physical substances, but primarily aims at the transmutation of the practitioner themselves. For what reason, then, does this knowledge remain covered by layers of enigmatic symbols and intentionally obscure texts? The answer fundamentally challenges the basis of contemporary materialist thought. Established power systems, whether religious, scientific, or political, depend on a population that remains unaware of its own capacity for self-transformation. When individuals acquire the means to activate their intrinsic potential without institutional intermediaries, the entire hierarchical structure of society is threatened. The alchemical journey thus constitutes a revolutionary technology of the spirit, capable of breaking the bonds of psychic dependence. Precisely for this reason, its true principles are so zealously guarded, frequently distorted or ridiculed in public discourse. Have you ever questioned why cultures so distant in time and space developed surprisingly similar symbolic systems? Or why certain works that address true alchemy mysteriously disappear from public archives? The journey that now begins offers neither conventional answers nor intellectual comforts. It invites an incursion into the depths of a knowledge that, when properly assimilated, transforms not only the understanding of the world, but the very nature of the seeker. Far from representing merely a historical relic or medieval curiosity, alchemy constitutes a key to deciphering the hidden codes of reality, a map for navigating between dimensions of consciousness that modern science doesn't even recognize exist. It is precisely for this reason that certain circles of power would prefer it to remain buried under the weight of oblivion and discredit. Wrapped in a fundamental paradox that few dare confront, the true nature of alchemy raises an intriguing question. Why would knowledge capable of liberating human beings from their psychic and spiritual limitations be so zealously guarded? The answer is not found in medieval laboratories where metals were melted, but in the invisible structures of power that shape our perception of reality. Authentic alchemical documents, those not adulterated or simplified for public consumption, present a complete technology of inner transmutation. It is not limited to the manipulation of physical substances, but to the activation of energetic keys that open portals to expanded states of consciousness. This knowledge, when genuinely applied, makes the individual progressively independent of external control systems, whether religious, political, or economic. This is the reason why certain circles of influence prefer that you remain ignorant of your true transformative potential. Reflect on the following. In every hierarchically structured society, power depends on maintaining a cognitive and energetic imbalance. When isolated individuals develop the ability to access elevated states of perception without institutional intermediaries directly, the social pyramid inevitably begins to crumble. The alchemical proposal thus represents a direct threat to the pillars that sustain our current civilizational paradigm. Far from being mere archaic representations, alchemical symbols constitute precise codes that activate specific resonances in the human psyche. The sun and moon, sulfur and mercury, the eagle and the lion, each pair represents complementary forces that, when appropriately harmonized, catalyze profound transformations in the operator. These images function as vibrational keys that, when adequately contemplated, reorganize the neuroenergetic structures of the individual, allowing them to transcend the limitations of ordinary consciousness. Who knows himself, knows the universe and the gods. This Hermetic maxim synthesizes the core of the question. Alchemy proposes that the boundary between subjectivity and objectivity is fundamentally illusory. The microcosm perfectly reflects the macrocosm, and operations performed in the outer laboratory mirror and amplify the transmutations of the inner laboratory. Radically, this perspective challenges the Cartesian division between mind and matter that grounds modern scientific thought. While institutionalized science insists on the separation between observer and phenomenon, the Hermetic tradition affirms their essential unity. It is not surprising, therefore, that the academic establishment has systematically marginalized, ridiculed, or distorted alchemical principles throughout the centuries. Transcending the merely academic sphere, the debate between institutionalized knowledge and esoteric wisdom constitutes a silent battle for control of human consciousness. Whoever defines what constitutes valid knowledge ultimately determines the limits of the possible and impossible in human experience. Alchemy, in its deepest essence, is a technology of psychic emancipation that challenges these limits, inviting each seeker to rediscover their intrinsic power of self-determination. This is the fundamental thesis that will guide our exploration. Alchemy was not merely the cradle of modern chemistry, but an integral science of consciousness, deliberately obscured to maintain intact the power structures that depend on the limitation of human potential. In the year 48 BCE, the destruction of the Great Library of Alexandria transcended a simple, regrettable historical incident. It represented the first documented act of a systematic campaign to eradicate knowledge that could emancipate humanity. Rarely mentioned by historians, among the more than 700,000 scrolls lost to flames were treatises on ancient Egyptian alchemy that were never recovered. This loss did not occur by accident, but was meticulously orchestrated by forces that understood the transformative power contained in those documents. From the perspective of various scholars, alchemy represents much more than the simple embryo of modern chemistry, constituting an ancestral knowledge carefully veiled. Some researchers suggest it flourished in ancient Egypt, where its rituals intertwined with funerary practices and divine veneration. Exceptional documents kept far from public scrutiny indicate that the first techniques for manipulating metals, perfumes, and glasses were integrated into a worldview where matter and spirit were never separated. There is evidence, although contested by more orthodox views, that Egyptian priests, holders of secret codes, would have used this science to transcend the boundaries between the worlds of the living and the dead, employing alchemical processes to ensure eternal life for the pharaohs. Certain interpretive currents propose that much of these texts remain hidden in private libraries or under the custody of discrete societies, fearful of the transformative power contained within them. This power, according to such perspectives, would liberate human beings from the limitations of a purely material existence, revealing pathways to awaken latent forces and access more subtle dimensions of reality. The word chem, etymological root of chemistry and alchemy, literally meant black earth, referring both to the fertile soil of Egypt and to the initial stage of the alchemical work. This knowledge silently migrated through trade routes to the Arab world, where it was preserved during the centuries of European obscurantism. Jabir ibn Hayyan, Geber, al-Razi, and Avicenna were not mere translators of ancient texts. They were guardians of forbidden knowledge that could reconfigure the relationship between consciousness and matter. When finally reaching medieval Europe, the revolutionary nature of this knowledge quickly attracted the attention of powerful institutions. The persecution of alchemists like Paracelsus, the invaded laboratories, and the confiscated texts do not constitute mere historical coincidence. In 1317, John XXII issued a papal bull explicitly prohibiting alchemical practice, not because it was ineffective, as the official history suggests, but precisely because its results threatened the Church's monopoly on access to the divine. Between Egyptian Hermetic wisdom, the architectural enigmas of Gothic cathedrals, and the complex psychic operations of the opus magnum, an uninterrupted tradition of transformative knowledge is established, deliberately obscured for the uninitiated. This golden line of transmission represents not merely techniques of material manipulation, but a complete system for activating dormant potentials of human consciousness. Have you ever pondered why virtually all historical figures associated with true alchemy died in mysterious circumstances, or had their work systematically distorted by official historiography? The answer emerges with clarity when we understand that the true alchemical gold was never a physical metal, but a transmuted consciousness, free from restrictions imposed by established control systems, and capable of directly shaping the matrix of reality. In the depths of alchemy, few scholars dared immerse themselves as deeply as the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung. While traditional academia rejected alchemical treatises as primitive pseudo-scientific delusions, Jung recognized in them the codification of fundamental psychic processes that transcend cultures and epochs. His revealing discovery, systematically ignored by dominant institutions, was that these obscure texts documented not mere naive attempts to manipulate metals, but precisely mapped the stages of transformation of human consciousness. In his monumental work, Psychology and Alchemy, Jung demonstrates that recurring symbols in alchemical treatises, the sun and moon, the king and queen, the green lion and the eagle, do not constitute arbitrary allegories, but direct manifestations of archetypes deeply rooted in humanity's collective unconscious. These primordial images emerge spontaneously during processes of psychic integration, signaling specific stages on the path to realizing what Jung called the self, the psychic totality that transcends and includes the conscious ego. The Jungian revolution dismantled the established narrative that alchemy was merely a misguided precursor to modern chemistry. In fact, it revealed that alchemists operated simultaneously in two dimensions, the material and the psychic. Their laboratory manipulations served as mirrors for inner transformations, in a process that indissociably interconnected observer and phenomenon. At the heart of the alchemical tradition, the operations of calcinatio, solutio, coagulatio, sublimatio, and mortificatio can be interpreted as stages of a journey of self-realization. Despite focusing primarily on cathedral symbolism, Fulcanelli alludes to the importance of understanding each process as a key to deciphering our psyche. Calcinatio, according to some contemporary interpretations, transcends the mere burning of material impurities, representing the incineration of limiting beliefs that imprison us. Similarly, Solutio symbolizes the incursion into deep waters of the unconscious, dissolving rigid structures of the ego and making room for new perceptions. Ancient manuscripts suggest, albeit with interpretive variations, that such stages facilitate contact with realities that challenge conventional logic, bringing the aspirant closer to subtle energies potentially capable of influencing matter itself. The dispersion of these symbols and techniques in archaic and Hermetic texts reinforces the hypothesis of intentional protection of this knowledge, reserving it only for those considered prepared or worthy to enter such mysteries. The Jungian individuation process, the psychic journey toward integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of personality, correlates with impressive precision to the stages of the alchemical opus magnum. The nigredo, black work, corresponds to confronting one's own shadow, repressed aspects of the psyche that must be recognized and integrated. The albedo, white work, reflects the emergence of a more purified consciousness, capable of recognizing projections and reintegrating them. The rubedo, red work, signals the union of intrapsychic opposites and the birth of an integral consciousness. The Jungian perspective illuminates the reason why true alchemical texts have been systematically hidden, distorted, or destroyed throughout history. They contained not only formulas for transforming physical substances, but precise technologies to catalyze the integral development of human consciousness, a process that inevitably liberates the individual from external dependencies and institutional authorities. Have you noticed how power systems, whether religious or scientific, invariably try to discredit any approach that confers psychic autonomy to the individual? The Jungian interpretation of alchemy reveals that, under the layers of Hermetic symbolism, hides a revolutionary psychotechnology capable of activating dormant potentials that would make human beings substantially less susceptible to external manipulations. This understanding establishes a fundamental bridge between psychic and material processes, challenging the Cartesian dualism that grounds modern science. Alchemical transmutation demonstrates that consciousness and matter are not distinct substances, but different vibrations of the same primordial reality, a truth that would radically transform our understanding of the universe and our place in it. While Jung explored the psychological dimension of alchemy in the academic environment of 20th century Zurich, another scholar investigated the depths of this knowledge through a radically different path. René Guénon, a French philosopher and initiate in Eastern and Western esoteric traditions, proposed a reading of alchemy that frontally challenges the premises of scientific modernity. For Guénon, alchemy represented not mere psychological projection or primitive chemistry, but an integral part of what he called traditional knowledge, a primordial wisdom uninterruptedly transmitted since immemorial times through carefully preserved initiatic systems. In dramatic contrast to the progressive vision of modern science stands the Guénonian perspective. While the former conceives human knowledge as a constantly expanding edifice, Guénon proposes that fundamental truths were revealed to humanity in their totality at the beginning of time, and that subsequent history represents not an evolution, but a progressive degeneration and fragmentation of this integral knowledge. What we now call science would merely constitute a partial and disconnected aspect of a once unified worldview. This traditional approach illuminates aspects of alchemy that the Jungian interpretation, despite its depth, cannot fully encompass. The alchemical work in this perspective aims not only at the psychic integration of the individual, but at their effective reintegration into cosmic orders of reality that transcend the merely human. Among the most enigmatic figures associated with this tradition stands Fulcanelli, author of The Mystery of Cathedrals and The Dwellings of the Philosophers. His true identity remains unknown, fueling speculation about secret societies and Hermetic brotherhoods that would protect alchemical teachings. In his writings, Fulcanelli suggests that the great Gothic cathedrals of Europe hide formulas encoded in architectural details and sculptures, potentially revealing principles of internal and external transmutation. According to some theories, possibly exaggerated by contemporary enthusiasts, a select group of builders and masons would have preserved these secrets, inserting symbols at strategic points of the buildings to instruct initiates without arousing suspicion from the church or authorities. This knowledge, when deciphered, would supposedly reveal methods to transform the lead of the ordinary human condition into spiritual gold, expanding consciousness to higher states. Various speculative currents, some more grounded than others, suggest that governmental, corporate, or religious entities would have an interest in keeping this knowledge distant from the general public, fearing the autonomy it would potentially provide to each individual. The Gothic cathedrals, those stone colossi that still dominate European urban landscapes, do not merely represent expressions of medieval religious fervor. They are, as Fulcanelli meticulously documented, stone books encoding Hermetic knowledge that could not be openly expressed in Christian Europe. Each gargoyle, each stained glass window, each architectural proportion carries ciphered messages that, when properly decoded, reveal the operative secrets of the great work. Have you ever noticed how certain decorative elements in cathedrals seem strangely displaced from the Orthodox Christian context? Pagan figures, astrological symbols, and alchemical representations discreetly inserted among biblical images. These do not constitute mere artistic whims, but a complete system of initiatic transmission, visible only to those with eyes to see. The convergence between the Guénonian traditional vision and Fulcanelli's archaeological discoveries points to an inevitable conclusion. There exists a golden line of transmission of Hermetic knowledge that crosses cultures and epochs, preserving technologies of consciousness that challenge the limitations of the materialist paradigm. This knowledge does not evolve in the modern sense. It is periodically veiled and revealed, according to cycles of collective obscurity and illumination. The north portal of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris presents an enigmatic alchemical figure known as the Athanor, the philosophical furnace where transmutation occurs. This symbol, strategically positioned at the interface between the outer profane world and the inner sacred space, precisely encodes the nature of the initiatic process, a transformative passage between ordinary and extraordinary states of consciousness. The remarkable convergence between Jung's psychological vision and Guénon's traditionalist approach transcends mere intellectual coincidence. When two apparently divergent perspectives point to the same phenomenon through distinct paths, we encounter a revealing indication. Simultaneously a science of matter and an art of the spirit, alchemy constitutes precisely the meeting point where deep psychology and traditional knowledge intertwine, revealing a truth that few contemporary systems dare confront: the interdependent relationship between consciousness and reality. In alchemical operations, this interpenetration between observer and phenomenon finds its most precise expression through the understanding of psychic projection. Various alchemical processes are based on the premise that human consciousness projects meaning onto matter, not the other way around. In his analyses of ancient manuscripts, Fulcanelli observes that alchemists, when carrying out their laboratory work, essentially interacted with projections of their own inner world manifested in physical substances. Each chromatic transformation, each change of state, or each observed reaction symbolized, according to this interpretation, a stage of spiritual evolution toward complete integration. This perspective suggests alchemy as a sophisticated spiritual technology, potentially capable of harmonizing internal and external forces to generate therapeutic effects and perceptual expansion. Certain esoteric currents, some possibly exaggerating their scope, consider such knowledge particularly significant or even dangerous for supposedly enabling individuals to influence their own reality. The connection with the divine in this interpretive context would transcend conventional religious dogmas, manifesting as a direct experience of sacredness. Such an experience would stimulate questioning about the predominant power structures in society, catalyzing a personal transformation with possible collective repercussions. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, transcends mere poetic analogy, constituting a fundamental operative principle. When the alchemist manipulates metals in his outer laboratory, he simultaneously transmutes psychic energies in his inner laboratory. This correlation is not merely symbolic, but fundamentally energetic, which explains why only those who attain certain states of consciousness can effectively perform successful alchemical operations. Have you noticed how the 5 topics we have examined so far, from the forbidden archives of Egypt to the psychic projections of the alchemical laboratory, converge in a single direction? All point to a coherent system of knowledge that transcends modern epistemological fragmentation. All suggest the existence of an integral science capable of unifying domains that we currently perceive as separate: matter and spirit, objective and subjective, science and consciousness. This integrative perspective raises an uncomfortable question. If such knowledge truly exists, why does it remain inaccessible to the general public? The answer lies precisely in the transformative nature of this knowledge. Unlike conventional sciences, which can be applied externally without necessarily altering the operator, true alchemy demands and promotes a radical transmutation of the consciousness of those who practice it. Imagine the socio-political impact of a population that began en masse to awaken to its latent capabilities of energetic and psychic self-determination. Power structures that fundamentally depend on collective projections and tacit consent would see their foundations quickly disintegrate. It is not surprising, therefore, that certain elites throughout history have zealously preserved this knowledge, sharing it only in strictly controlled circles of initiates. The manuscripts that survived, the symbols encoded in cathedrals, the alchemical operations described in veiled language, all constitute fragments of an integrated system of transformative knowledge. A system that, when properly understood and applied, not only expands individual perception, but fundamentally redefines the relationship between human beings and cosmos, between consciousness and manifest reality. Envision the case of a contemporary researcher with rigorous training in organic chemistry from a renowned institution who accidentally discovers a 17th century alchemical manuscript in a private library. The document, unlike conventional texts available to the public, contains not only symbolic instructions, but detailed operative guidelines on the simultaneous manipulation of external substances and internal energies. Initially skeptical as his materialist training demanded, he decides to test some of the simpler procedures described in the text. The first results prove disconcerting. Certain chemical reactions that, according to the parameters of conventional science, should produce predictable results, begin to manifest anomalies when performed under altered states of consciousness, following precisely the instructions in the manuscript. Unexpected colors emerge from compounds. Precipitates form in ordered patterns that defy mechanical explanation. Some substances exhibit electromagnetic properties that contradict established classifications. Enthusiastic, the researcher presents his preliminary findings to the academic community and immediately faces a barrier of institutional hostility. His methods are ridiculed for incorporating altered states of consciousness. His results are dismissed as experimental contaminations. His interest in alchemical texts is interpreted as an irrational deviation by a previously promising scientist. Funding departments abruptly terminate his grants, journals reject his articles without substantive review, and colleagues gradually cut professional contact. Isolated, but not dissuaded, he transforms his residence into a laboratory and proceeds independently. After 3 years of systematic experimentation, he achieves results that transcend any initial expectation. Not only does he develop compounds with extraordinary therapeutic properties, but he perceives profound transformations in his own psychophysical constitution. His sensory perception dramatically amplifies, scientific intuitions manifest spontaneously. Previously invisible connections between distinct phenomena become evident. This contemporary case remarkably mirrors the experiences reported by historical alchemists like Paracelsus, who also faced institutional persecution while developing revolutionary medicines, or Nicolas Flamel, whose personal transformations occurred parallel to his laboratory operations. It precisely illustrates how the principles discussed earlier, psychic projection onto matter, transformative operations of consciousness, the awakening of latent potentials, manifest concretely when someone dares to transcend the limits of the established scientific paradigm. Transcending the individual system of transformation, alchemy contains in its principles the code for a complete reorganization of the social fabric. The phenomena we currently witness, ecological crises, financial collapses, social fragmentation, and epidemics of mental illness, do not constitute anomalies or deviations, but inevitable consequences of a civilization founded on the artificial separation between humanity and nature, between consciousness and matter, between individual and collective. A worldview that treats the cosmos as an inert mechanism inevitably produces a reality where resources are mercilessly exploited and quantitative values supplant intrinsic qualities. In contrast, the alchemical worldview recognizes the interpenetration of all levels of existence and the transformative responsibility of human consciousness. Not coincidentally, alchemical principles resurface precisely now when reductionist paradigms demonstrate their insufficiency to address multi-dimensional global challenges. The integrative vision of Hermeticism offers precisely what fragmented systems of specialization cannot provide: an understanding of the organic connections between apparently disconnected domains of experience. Traditionally associated with the manufacture of the philosopher's stone, the conclusion of the opus magnum transcends the simple obtainment of a precious metal. According to scholars like Fulcanelli and other authorities in the Hermetic tradition, it represents the supreme realization of our human potential, the moment when we overcome the limitations of the individualized ego to harmonize with a broader cosmic intelligence. In this transformed state, the inner gold naturally manifests in our daily actions, potentially catalyzing profound transformations not only in the personal sphere, but in the social fabric itself. Individuals who access these deeper dimensions of alchemical knowledge can, according to certain interpretations, transform experiences of suffering into opportunities for self-discovery, and possibly lead transformative initiatives in various fields, challenging conventional paradigms based on competition and fear. However, some analytical currents suggest that this perspective contradicts established interests of groups that benefit from maintaining states of alienation and dependence in society. Consequently, there would be a systematic effort, whose extent is debated among specialists, to filter or reinterpret fundamental aspects of alchemical doctrine, limiting public access to its transformative methodology. The recovery of this ancestral knowledge would represent, from this perspective, a potentially revolutionary step toward autonomous responsibility and emancipation at multiple levels: spiritual, psychological, and social. In his fundamental study, The Forge and the Crucible, historian Mircea Eliade documented how primitive metallurgical traditions already contained the germ of transformative thinking that would later characterize formal alchemy. The tribal metalworker not only forged tools, he also consciously participated in a cosmic process of gestation and transmutation. This integrative perspective, where technology and spirituality harmoniously coexist, offers a dramatic counterpoint to the epistemological division of modernity. Can you envision the implications of a mass rediscovery of these principles today? A society that understood the fundamental interdependence between states of consciousness and material manifestations would inevitably develop radically different approaches to issues such as health, education, economics, and governance. Centralized hierarchical systems, which depend on the psychic passivity of populations, would gradually give way to self-organized organic structures, grounded in the recognition of the transformative capacity inherent in each individual. The financial and market spheres, which currently extract value through the artificial maintenance of scarcity, would be forced to adapt to a more holistic understanding of abundance. Medicine, now fragmented into specialties that treat symptoms in isolation, would rediscover integrative approaches that recognize the psychosomatic unity of the human being. Education would transcend the mere transmission of segmented information to embrace the integral development of latent human potential. This vision does not represent mere utopian speculation, but a concrete possibility grounded in the operative principles we have examined. The alchemical great work has always pointed beyond the individual laboratory, indicating social transformations that emerge organically when transmuted consciousnesses interact with crystallized structures. It is precisely for this reason that certain circles of power historically feared and suppressed authentic Hermetic knowledge, not because it was ineffective, but for its revolutionary potential when applied beyond the individual sphere. Through this journey through the veiled territories of alchemy, we have confronted a truth that fundamentally challenges the dominant materialist narrative. There exists an ancestral knowledge that transcends the artificial boundaries between science and spirituality, between subjectivity and objectivity, between individual transformation and collective evolution. This knowledge was not merely forgotten or superseded by scientific progress. It was deliberately obscured by systems that depend on the fragmentation of human consciousness. Far beyond the simple transmutation of metals, authentic alchemy offers an integral technology to activate dormant potentials in human beings. The enigmatic manuscripts, the coded laboratory operations, the architectural symbols of cathedrals all converge toward a map of transmutation that leads from the ordinary state of fragmented consciousness to the full realization of latent possibilities that most barely suspect they possess. Neither linear nor conquerable through mere accumulation of information, the alchemical journey demands a progressive dissolution of crystallized structures, both psychic and conceptual, that keep perception imprisoned in limited modes of apprehending reality. The nigrado, the black phase of confrontation with inner shadows, necessarily precedes the albedo, the dawn of a purified consciousness. And only through the integration of apparently opposite polarities emerges the rubedo, the realization of the fundamental unity that underlies manifested multiplicity. This process, simultaneously intimate and universal, contains a revolutionary potential that transcends the merely personal. When individuals awaken to their innate capacity for conscious self-determination, social structures, based on external manipulation and systematic limitation of human potential, inevitably begin to dissolve. True alchemical transmutation does not occur in isolation within the confines of a laboratory. It reverberates through the interconnected fabric of shared reality. The phenomena we witness today, the progressive rediscovery of arcane knowledge, the resurgence of ancestral techniques of inner work, the growing dissatisfaction with reductionist paradigms, do not represent historical coincidence. They manifest what Jung called synchronicity, a meaningful alignment between collective need and archetypal knowledge that emerges precisely when most needed. The veil that kept authentic alchemy obscured gradually dissolves, revealing not a relic of the past, but a technology of the future. Thus arises the fundamental question that this knowledge presents us with. Could it be that the true alchemical gold, that miraculous substance capable of transforming the vile into the precious, the fragmented into the whole, the alienated into the conscious, lies dormant in the depths of human consciousness itself, awaiting the transformative fire that will awaken it? And if the true philosopher's stone is not an external object to be discovered, but an inner capacity to be realized, a capacity that, when fully manifested, not only transmutes the individual, but catalyzes fundamental transformations in all spheres of reality with which it interacts. Alchemy invites us to transcend the condition of passive observers, to assume our role as conscious operators of the great cosmic transmutation, not as an isolated elite holding secrets, but as responsible participants in a universal process of awakening. Knowledge is no longer imprisoned in inaccessible codes, but is revealed through the direct experience of those who dare to begin their own transformative journey. The message sealed in the stones of cathedrals, ciphered in medieval manuscripts, encoded in Hermetic symbols, finally reveals its purpose: to invite each sincere seeker to rediscover their essential alchemical nature, one that transforms not only metals, but entire worlds. Faced with this revealed knowledge, what would be the first concrete step in your personal alchemical journey? Every transformation begins with understanding your role as co-creator, and the only way to connect with this divine intelligence is through meditation. Contemplative practices have always constituted the core of the Hermetic tradition, allowing the operator to align their internal frequencies with the cosmic vibrations necessary for transformative work. We have developed a specific set of sound tools to facilitate your access to this state of elevated consciousness, carefully calibrated to provide this first contact with your inner laboratory. To learn more and gain immediate access, click on the link displayed in this video or in the comments. If this video resonated with your inner experience, if these truths awakened something dormant in your being, share your experience by writing in the comments. It made sense to me.